The left have their newest hero. Surprise, surprise, he's probably a criminal. We don't know exactly for sure, but the signs seem to point in that direction. This is following up on a segment that I did, I think it was last week. No, it was 2 weeks ago, where I was talking about the mass deportations that should be happening under Trump and aren't really happening under Trump because of all of the legal blocks that are being put in the way. So I was asking, why are they still here? This one was more specifically orientated around the trendy Aragua gang that were being identified by law agencies through their tattoos and associations, and obviously the crimes that they were committing, and being deported that way. There was a big stink about the fact, you can't identify gang members through all of the gang tattoos that they have. Ridiculous argument, and but they were using that kind of human rights violations and all of the arguments surrounding that to try to block these people being taken out of the country.
If someone has face tattoos, they've probably committed crime at some point. They're guilty of something.
Just on principle, we should deport them. If you have a facial
Even if
tattoo.
they are native, just deport them.
Yes, straight to El Salvador.
Aesthetic crimes.
Bukele can deal with you. He knows what to do. And then this was followed up with earlier on this week, in fact, just a day or two ago, where Stelios was covering what I'm going to cover a little bit of today, which was the case around the new hero, who is Kilmar Abrega Garcia, named Kilmar. Interesting choice by his parents, where Stelios was looking at the due process debate and asking whether rounding up all of these illegal migrants and potential gang members and simply shipping them off to El Salvador was legal, whether it was constitutional, and whether it stuck to their right to due process. Now, I would personally argue immediately that if you have entered the country illegally in the first place, you have no right to due process, you have no right to be in the country, and therefore are not subject to and privileged to the rights that are assigned to citizens. But Stelios wanted to talk about that. My takeaway for me personally is that getting bogged down in this whole due process argument is a complete distraction because the process is already rigged. It's rigged in favour of human rights lawyers and subversives who just want to block the process for as long as possible. Ultimately, you might win the legal case and be able to deport them, but that may be years in advance from now, and it means that you do not get to deport anywhere near as many people as needs to be out of the country.
And it's also, this is a bit of foreshadowing for my segment here, it's very much politically possible if you have the political capital and the will to do it, because Pakistan, in 2 weeks, deported 80,000 people, and they perhaps even more than that, because the 80,000 were just the people that left voluntarily. And so, could you imagine, in the space of a month, you could be deporting 250,000 people a month?
Yeah, and if most of those are self-deporting as well, then you don't even have to worry about all of the complaints about human rights, especially if you're in the UK or Europe, where there's the ECHR to deal with, which always uses, what is it? Is it Article 8 is the right to a family life?
Or is it Article 9? I can't remember.
One of them is the right to a family life, and the other one is the right to not face degrading or humiliating experiences, which are the two that they always use to block these kinds of actions, because it's either they've already got a family here, so you can't get rid of them, or if you send them back to their home country, they're probably going to face a pretty severe punishment for, say, being a murderer, being a rapist.
There was a case of, I think he was a Nigerian fella, he had committed either a child sex crime or something akin to that.
One of the usuals.
And they were like, he'll face persecution in Nigeria.
Good.
And yeah, not only is it good and he deserves worse, but also he faces persecution here because it's against the law.
Yes, Nigeria, what you're accusing them of is being a country that upholds their laws, whereas we aren't. I mean, what's the argument? What's the moral argument there? Either way, the fact that they can hold all of this up for as long as they already have is a sign that the system is broken and working in the interests of our enemies. And this is the perfect case for it, because as part of this, Stelios was talking about Mr. Kilmar Garcia, and I wanted to look at the evidence for why it is that they are making the argument that he has been deported. He was deported as part of a clerical or administration error, by the sounds of it, but they want to keep him out of the country, and I'm going to look at the kind of evidence that they are using. First, though, the Democrat and left-wing media response to it has been as hysterical as you would expect, making claims that Trump is absolutely unhinged for pointing out that Garcia has tattoos on his left knuckles, which seem to indicate that he is MS-13 because he's from El Salvador. For those who don't remember, MS-13 were the gang that were terrorizing El Salvador that Bukele cracked down on in the first place. Now, this tattoo is of a marijuana leaf, smiley face, a cross, and a skull. Now, they've photoshopped here MS-13 over the top of it, and it makes sense until you get to the skull, which was kind of confusing to me. So M for marijuana, smiley face for S, 1 is the shape of the cross, 3 was the skull, didn't make sense to me, but it's something like it's El Cranio or something like that. And
El Cranio.
And E is the third letter of the alphabet.
That's like... If an English person had to guess at what a Mexican called a skull, that would be it.
El Cranio. Well, it might be me guessing. It might be, but I looked it up because I was a little bit confused with this, just going, is this Trump and his administration just BSing? Are they making stuff up? But there does seem to be some symbolism behind it, so I could give him the benefit of the doubt there. To make sure that you all know that he's just an innocent good boy who didn't do nothing, Democrats have literally gone out to El Salvador to meet with Garcia. Here is Garcia right here.
He's dressed like an American tourist as well, so you know he's harmless.
Yeah, that's how it always works. And here is Senator Chris Van Hollen, who's gone out to make sure that he's okay and not being treated incorrectly in El Salvador. They say in this article, Democratic lawmakers, including Van Hollen and a quartet of House progressives, recently traveled to El Salvador to visit him, who has been held in Salvadorian prisons since his deportation last month, and they are pushing for his release. On Monday, Democratic Representatives Maxwell Frost of Florida, Robert Garcia of California, Yasamin Ansari of Arizona. Only one of those names sounds particularly American to me, but that's just my opinion. As well as Maxine Dexter of Oregon, they all arrived in El Salvador to bring attention to President Trump's illegal defiance of the binding and unanimous Supreme Court decision, because this went to the Supreme Court. They said you need to bring him back and allow him his due process, which, again, seems like a complete waste of time to me, because in all likelihood he's just going to get sent back in the end anyway.
Well, the whole reason they're doing all of this theatre is to try and bring up like a human example, say, look at what Trump's doing. He sent this innocent man away from where he wanted to be. Isn't it terrible? That's true of every single one of those people, all of those gang members that really wanted to sell drugs to your children. Yeah.
This was always the threat, even leading up to the election, where people were saying, okay, if Trump gets in, does mass deportations, actually gets the ball rolling on it, the media is going to centre around not the worst cases, but they're going to try and find the people who are as innocent as possible, get pictures of their families crying, looking sad, do interviews with people about the destruction to the local communities that it's causing. Not that they ever cared about when these people were coming in and destroying the local communities by completely changing the culture, uprooting people who had to move out, destroying local job markets by suppressing wages. They never cared about anything like that. It's when you try and fix those problems, that's when you need to get the ball rolling, get the cameras out so you can get pictures of the children in cages.
They also, when Trump got elected, didn't they video women at the southern border, at the border wall, just bursting into tears?
It was already illegal.
Yeah,
you shouldn't be there in the first place. I don't feel bad for you.
Now it's doubly illegal.
It's like if murder hadn't been illegal before, and they just made it law. You can't kill people anymore.
Damn.
And you got a video of a man with a knife about to stab someone. He's oh God, I can't believe it. You weren't supposed to do it in the first place.
I was willing to do it when it was illegal once, but illegal twice. That is my line.
I know, right? But at a press conference in El Salvador, he said that he was there because he'd received hundreds and hundreds of calls and emails from his constituents saying, I represent a lot of immigrants. I represent a lot of people who see themselves represented in this situation. So a lot of illegals and gang members, presumably. They're saying, Congressman, do what you can now because it's him today and it can be one of us tomorrow. So he's outright admitting there his primary interests are for the immigrants in his community, not the Americans, not the people who have been there legally for who knows how long, not the people who may be able to trace their ancestry back to and before the Civil War. No, he's not working for those people, he's working for the foreign elements in his constituency.
Well, that's what the Democrats have to rely on now. Now they're supposedly slowly losing their core demographics. Trump even won around a historic number of black voters and Hispanics. And so the people already in America are trending towards Republicans more generally, as in the broadest sense.
Well, there was a report,
and so they need foreigners to grant them amnesty for them to vote for them. So it's contingent on their survival that they speak to these sorts of people and try and pretend like they care about them.
Yeah, and there was a report, I mean, this was on Fox News, so they're going to bias it, but they were talking about how back in 2016, the people who were being polled about mass deportations, only 36% supported. Now we're in 2025, only 9 years later, I think it had gone up to 56%. Around that figure. So yes, you are right. More and more people are in favour of this, especially following Biden, who let
the
so
problem's
many
also got
through the
worse,
border.
so it makes sense that more people are going to talk about it.
Yes, but as always, I love visiting this website every so often because you just see the most bonkers rubbish posted on there. I decided to take a look at the Daily Forward to see what they might have to say on this situation.
Good luck.
And they compared it to the Dreyfus affair.
I don't even know.
Do you know the Dreyfus affair from the late 19th century when a member of the French High Command who happened to be Jewish was accused of being a traitor and then imprisoned falsely, and then there was a big civil rights movement to try and clear his name and get him out of there, and they're comparing this to that.
Did he come to the country illegally?
No, I mean he was a decorated officer in the High Command.
He was French. That's guilty enough for me.
Yeah, but they're trying to compare it to that, and they're trying to make the argument through this that there is no evidence against him, and that the people supporting his deportation are being irrational and unreasonable. So the question is that true? Is it true that the people who are saying maybe he shouldn't have been in the country in the first place, are they being irrational, or is there evidence on their side? Well, let's take a look at that. First, I'll go to the BBC, so you know that this is not going to be biased in a right-wing direction. And let's see what they have to say on the matter. So here's some of the evidence against him. So first of all, he has already acknowledged, Garcia this is, that in 2012 he came to the country illegally. Straight away. So this is why I say that he should not be under the protection of the same civil rights as other people in the country who are there legally and who are legal citizens.
I think it's fair to say that if you come to a country illegally, there should be no route to citizenship. If your first act on arriving in a country is to break the law, well, quite frankly, I don't care about your wishes whatsoever.
What about his...
To say the least.
I agree. And what about his potential association with gang activity and MS-13 in particular?
Well, I think that even if there are some, false positives, I don't. If it were my safety in the United States, I would not care in the slightest. If you're in any way, even, linked in any way to MS-13, just don't come to the country.
Well,
don't get let in. Don't get granted citizenship, and that is how you avoid having foreign gangs in your country. Is just avoid the places where they come from.
I would agree, but let's see what the evidence is in the first place before we jump to too many conclusions. So back in March of 2019, he was detained along with 3 other people in Hyattsville, Maryland, in the car park of a Home Depot. Officers at the Prince George's County Police Department said that the men were loitering and subsequently identified Mr. Abrego Garcia, Kilmar, and 2 of the others as members of MS-13. In a document titled The Gangfield Interview Sheet, the local police detailed their observations. They said Garcia was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and a hoodie with rolls of money covering the eyes, ears and mouth of the presidents on the separate denominations. Officers claimed the clothing were indicative of Hispanic gang culture and that wearing the Chicago Bulls hat represents that they are a member in good standing with MS-13.
They're big Chicago Bulls fans in MS-13, are they?
Well, apparently it's just a common piece of clothing that they wear. And they've even got somebody, Stephen Dudley, a journalist and author who spent years studying MS-13, said it's true that at some point the Chicago Bulls logo with the horns became a stand-in of sorts for the MS-13's devil horn symbol. So you've even got a supposed expert on the subject saying, yeah, they wear this. This is very indicative of the kind of clothes
they're doing it for the
wear.
logo rather than they're not fans of the team.
No, they're doing it for the symbolism of the devil horns. According to the field interview sheet and other court documents, officers said they were also advised by a proven and reliable source that Mr. Garcia was an active member of the MS-13's Western clique with the rank of Chequio. However, Mr. Dudley said that Chequio is not a rank, but is instead used to refer to recruits who are yet to be initiated. So all that's confirming is that he had been recruited by MS-13.
But he's not been Chequio'd yet.
Not yet.
Past his Chequio.
They also don't yet make note of any tattoos at this point. I've seen this pointed out online, which suggests that given that gang members tend to get tattoos as signifiers that they have committed certain acts or gotten a certain level of ranks into the gang, that presumably, given that he was a Chequio at this point, he must have been initiated after this arrest and then has gone on to do whatever it was needed to get the tattoos.
It's also worth mentioning as well that if you come from a country where tattoos signify that you're in a gang and you choose to get tattoos, you're very consciously choosing to present yourself as a gang member, which even if he's not a member of the gang, which it seems like he is, you're still trouble if you're trying to make out like you're some sort of tough guy who murders people for money, which isn't that tough.
And again, people are pointing out, well, the police didn't give the reasons exactly why they were saying that him and the others were MS-13, but I would imagine that police officers in an area like Maryland, which sadly has had a lot of gang activity in it since incursions from the southern border have been increasing, that the police officers would know. They would know what they're talking about. Lawyers, it carries on, for Mr. Garcia's argued in court filings that the Weston's clique is based in New York, where they said their client had never lived, and according to government documents, he has dismissed the information given to police against him as hearsay. According to his lawyers, Mr. Garcia has never been convicted of any criminal offence, including gang membership, in the US or in El Salvador.
Well, he has committed a criminal offence in breaking into the country.
Yes. It's strange that they didn't arrest him for that there and then, seeing as he confirmed, and the other two did as well, I believe, that they were all in the country illegally. But that's neither here nor there. That was the discretion of the police officers at the time. He lived in the US for 14 years, had 3 children, and worked in construction, according to court records. So he was a good boy, didn't do nothing, etc., etc. You know how the story goes. The judge who presided over his 2019 case said that based on the confidential information external, there was sufficient evidence to support Garcia's gang membership. That finding was later upheld by another judge as well. So it seems that the evidence presented in the courts was more than enough to confirm that he was at least a recruit into this gang.
And also, you can't necessarily rely on courts to be impartial. These are quite often courts that have a Democrat slant.
Potentially, so if they're reaffirming this as well, if they're confirming it...
Maybe these specific ones are different, I don't know.
Yeah. As a result, Garcia was refused bail and remained in custody. During his time, he applied for asylum so that he couldn't be deported to El Salvador. He wasn't granted asylum, but he was granted a withholding of removal order, which meant he couldn't be deported anyway. So the result is the same. In 2021, his wife, Jennifer Vasquez Schura, filed a protective order petition against him, alleging he had physically attacked her on multiple occasions, according to the documents shared by the US Department of Homeland Security. Ms. Vasquez Schura also said in a statement on the 16th of April that she decided not to follow through with the court process at the time, and that she and her husband were able to work through this situation privately as a family, including by going to counselling. So they talked out how beautiful for them. She described her husband as a loving partner and father, and has repeatedly denied that he is an MS-13 gang member, but of course she would, wouldn't she? Let's look at the DHS report, where they were talking about other things that he's been up to since he got here, including a potential suspected human trafficking incident. So this report was detailing a traffic stop encounter that led law enforcement officers to suspect Garcia of involvement in human trafficking. The documents also reveal that they already, again, thought that he was an MS-13 member. On December the 1st, 2022, Garcia was stopped by a Tennessee Highway Patrol officer for speeding. Upon approaching the vehicle, the encountering officer noted 8 other individuals in the vehicle. There was no luggage, leading the encountering officer to suspect that this was a human trafficking trafficking incident. Additionally, all the passengers gave the same home address as the subject's home address. So all these 8 people just happened to be living with Garcia, as well as Garcia's wife and children, I would assume.
To be fair, in that part of the world, it's not as unusual, but obviously there's funny business going on here.
Well, yeah, there's definitely funny business when it goes on to note that during the interview, Garcia pretended to speak less English than he was actually capable of and attempted to put the encountering officer off track by responding to questions with other questions. When asked what relationship he had with the registered owner of the vehicle, so it wasn't even his car, Garcia replied that the owner of the vehicle was his boss and that he worked in construction. So presumably the story they were going with was that they all just live at my house, SA. These are all my colleagues, SA.
These are all my cousins.
Yeah, these are my cousins, Holmes. That's the story that we're going with. We all work in construction, Holmes.
Can you do the rest of the segment talking in that voice?
No, what, like Speedy Gonzales? And that's it. At that point, Garcia got back in the car, sped off, and went, "Gandale, gandale, riba, riba!"
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. And they played... No, that's not
Mexican hat dance.
Yeah, the Mexican...
And they drank tequila and had a nap.
Well, they were all asleep at the time.
Yeah,
obviously.
everyone lived mediocrely ever after.
Oh, beautiful. The best kind of story you can get from Mexico. The encountering officer decided not to cite the subject for driving infractions, but gave him a warning citation for driving with an expired driver's license. I love that he keeps getting in these situations and nothing happens.
He's very lucky, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean...
He keeps on getting into criminal situations, and he's just like, I'll just write you up for your expired driving license. So you're driving someone else's car full of 8 suspicious people, all with the same address, and it's not even not your car. You don't have a license, and it's full of Mexicans. And
officer thinks for a minute. He's like, "All seems fine to me."
My goodness.
I mean, my God, good job he wasn't in LA. But obviously Donald Trump was posting about it. Here's that picture again with the MS-13. Interestingly enough, his wife actually thought that this was an important enough detail, the tattoos on his knuckles, that when she's been sharing about things on social media, she has purposefully been covering up his tattooed knuckles with love hearts. So that's interesting.
It's a very interesting placement, isn't it?
Is that something that you would do if they didn't mean anything? Maybe it's just a coincidence.
So I've got a slogan that I quite like to trot out, and I know people are quite cautious around slogans, but it's quite a good one. It's called, "When in doubt, chuck 'em out." And I think that this very much applies to this guy of, if there's any evidence, it doesn't matter. No one has a right to live in your country, so you can say no on, dare I say, trumped up charges, all you like, and sorry.
Yeah. It's all right. You get the puns in while you can.
I can. It's America's right to say no for any reason. If they say, we don't want people with, I don't know, a specific kind of tattoo, then it's the American people's right to say so. Who cares? All of this fussing, all of this nonsense is just a smokescreen for, we want illegals in our country because they vote for us.
And they cause trouble to our enemies.
Yeah, exactly.
And they depress your wages as well. Again, that's interesting. And also, there is on social media right now clips of his wife being asked about the protective order against him in 2021. She just freezes. She says nothing about it. She just moves straight on. She's like, "Oh, we dealt with it."
Do you see a muzzle slightly inch into frame close to her head?
Not in that video, but, anything could have been happening off camera. And we also actually have the report of the protective order describing it. I won't read the whole thing, but suffice to say, he was physically abusive to her in a way that wasn't very, very nice. So this is the kind of gentleman who has been confirmed numerous times by law enforcement, by 2 separate judges, to be a member of MS-13, seems to have tattoos on his body that indicate that he is a member of MS-13, has been suspected of human trafficking in the past, and also has been physically abusive to his wife. And this is the guy that Democrats, and the left in general, as you would expect, are trying to keep in your country, my fellow Americans. And
you're American?
I choose to be. Apparently, if this guy's American, I can be American, right?
I'm sure they'll give you the pass.
So there you go. I'm more related to the people that formed America, that founded America, than these guys are. So
that's true, yeah.
So there you go. And thankfully, there are at least some Democrats who have been saying, maybe this isn't the hill that we should die on. Trump basically got voted in off of the back of mass deportations. They're very popular, and this guy's probably a gang member. So let's not go with it. But some people are still stupid enough. So again, due process, have whatever feelings that you want on that. But I think the evidence seems to suggest pretty strongly that this guy is a gang member, not the kind of guy that you would want in your country in the first place. Who knows what he has been up to as part of his gang activities. There you go.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.